Imagine an ordinary day at the monastery, where peace reigned like a gentle breeze that calmed everyone's hearts. The sun was shining on the horizon, and the monks were immersed in their daily practices when a stranger appeared in the distance, walking with heavy, anger-laden steps. His expression was like a storm about to break, and his eyes, inflamed with hatred, sought a target. This man, consumed by his own darkness, had heard of Buddha and his growing influence, but instead of admiration, he felt only contempt. He believed no one could be as serene and wise as they said, and decided to prove to himself that Buddha was nothing more than another impostor. Upon arriving at the monastery, the man advanced directly to where Buddha was sitting, surrounded by his disciples. Without any warning, he began to unleash a barrage of insults, his voice echoing like thunder through the hall. "Who do you think you are?" he shouted. "What right do you have to place yourself above others, pretending to be so wise?" The monks around watched the scene with concern, feeling the venom in the man's words. But Buddha, with the serenity of a lake on an autumn morning, remained motionless. He did not react to the harsh words. There was no spark of anger in his eyes, nor a shadow of sadness on his face. He simply looked at the man with an expression of absolute calm, as if he were in front of a friend, not a challenger. And so, at that moment, the story began to unfold, with all eyes fixed on Buddha, awaiting his next move. They knew they were about to witness something extraordinary, something that would reveal the true nature of the path they were following. The man continued shouting, his voice full of fury, as if each word were a desperate attempt to hurt Buddha. The disciples around exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond to this torrent of hatred. But amidst all that agitation, Buddha remained serene, unshakable like a mountain before a storm. Instead of retaliating, Buddha looked at the man with a slight smile, a smile that was not condescending but carried a deep understanding. It was a smile of someone who had seen and felt all the world's pains and yet chosen the path of peace. Seeing that smile, the man became even more irritated. How could anyone be so indifferent to his offenses? He expected to see anger, sadness, anything that would show that his words had hit the mark. But all he found was the master's unshakable tranquility. "Why don't you react? Don't you have anything to say?" the man shouted, perplexed by Buddha's calm. Then Buddha, with a soft voice that echoed in the hearts of everyone present, replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man was silent for a moment, confused by the unexpected question. "It belongs to the one who tried to give it, of course," he replied, not understanding where Buddha was going with this. "That is how it is with anger, with offenses," Buddha continued, still smiling. "If I do not accept them, they remain yours." Buddha's words hung in the air, and the man felt a weight fall upon him. All his anger, which had seemed so justified before, began to dissipate, leaving a strange emptiness in its place. Buddha's smile was not a weapon but a manifestation of an inner strength that the man did not understand but was beginning to realize was much greater than any hatred he carried. Buddha had not retaliated, had not shown weakness. Instead, he had transformed the situation, showing the man that true strength was not in reacting but in the conscious choice not to let the poison enter one's heart. And in that moment, the man, without knowing how, began to feel something change inside him. The silence that followed Buddha's words was so deep it seemed almost palpable. The man, who moments earlier had been overwhelmed by a crushing fury, now found himself disarmed, confused, not knowing how to proceed. All his anger, which he had carried to that point like a shield, was beginning to dissolve in the face of Buddha's serenity. But Buddha did not let the moment pass. He knew that the man's mind was still restless, and so he did something unexpected. Instead of stepping back, instead of ignoring or protecting himself, Buddha leaned slightly forward as if he were genuinely interested in what the man had to say. His eyes, full of compassion, met the man's, and he calmly said, "Speak. I am here to listen." The man was surprised. He expected to be rejected, ignored, or even confronted. But Buddha was offering him something he did not expect: genuine attention. It wasn't a trick, it wasn't an attempt to manipulate. It was simply a demonstration of deep compassion and respect. Without realizing it, the man began to talk. At first, his words were still harsh, full of resentment and pain. But as he continued, something changed in his tone. He began to talk about his life, about the difficulties he faced, about the fears and insecurities that had led him to seek out Buddha that day. All that anger he had unleashed was not really against Buddha, but against the wounds he carried in his own heart. And Buddha, without interrupting, without judging, just listened. He gave space for the man to express all his pain, allowing it to dissipate like clouds slowly clearing to reveal a bright and luminous sky. As the man spoke, he began to realize something important. For the first time in a long time, someone was really listening to him, without trying to correct him, without trying to prove that he was wrong. And this, more than anything else, began to calm his troubled soul. When the man finally finished speaking, there was a new quietness in his gaze. He realized that there was no longer a need to shout, to attack. Buddha had not rejected him, had not treated him as an enemy. Instead, he had offered the simplest and most powerful gift anyone could give, the gift of simply being present and listening. And at that moment, the man began to understand that the peace he had been seeking so desperately was not in winning an argument or proving his point, but in finding someone who could see beyond his words and recognize his true pain. As the man finished speaking, a welcoming silence filled the space. He was exhausted, as if by unloading all his frustrations, he had freed himself from a burden he had been carrying for a long time. Buddha, with his calm and attentive presence, had allowed the man to pour out his pain without ever trying to correct or humiliate him. And then Buddha, with the same serenity he had maintained throughout the conversation, spoke again. But this time, his words were as gentle as a summer breeze, carrying with them a profound teaching. There are moments, said Buddha, when we carry in our hearts the desire to prove that we are right, to show the other that they are wrong. But this is like trying to put out a fire by throwing more wood onto the flames. The more we insist, the more the fire grows, until we are completely consumed. The man remained silent, reflecting on these words. He realized that throughout his life, he had fought to prove that he was right, to win arguments and come out on top. And now, looking at Buddha, he began to see how much that had fed his unhappiness. Buddha continued, "But true power is not in winning an argument or proving the other wrong. True power is in the ability to recognize one's own mistakes and, with humility, ask for forgiveness when necessary. This does not diminish us. On the contrary, it elevates us because it frees us from pride and allows us to grow in compassion." There was something deeply disarming about those words. The man, who until then had believed that showing weakness was a defeat, began to see that true strength was in accepting his flaws and in letting go of the need to always be right. And then, something unexpected happened. The man, with his eyes still fixed on Buddha, felt a lightness in his heart. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to lower his guard, and with a voice that carried more sincerity than he had ever used before, he said, "If at any moment I was unfair to you, if the words I said hurt you, I ask for your forgiveness." The words echoed in the air, and with them, something profound began to change within the man. He realized that asking for forgiveness was not a surrender, but an act of courage, an act that freed him from all the poison he had accumulated in his heart. Buddha, upon hearing this, simply nodded, his gaze full of understanding and compassion. He knew that in that simple act of asking for forgiveness, the man had taken a great step on his journey. It wasn't about who was right or wrong, but about finding peace within oneself, and that peace, Buddha knew, was the first step to a true transformation. The man, now with a lighter heart, began to understand that sometimes, letting go of the battle was the greatest victory one could achieve. The man, now transformed by the simple act of asking for forgiveness, felt a subtle but powerful change within himself. He had gone from being someone consumed by anger and pride to a person capable of recognizing his flaws. However, there was an even deeper lesson that Buddha was about to teach. Buddha, perceiving the openness in the man's heart, decided to share the essence of his message. He approached, his steps light and silent, as if floating above the ground. And with a voice as gentle as the morning light, he said, "True transformation occurs when we practice love and compassion, not only with those who treat us well, but especially with those who hurt us. For it is in kindness, in humility, that true strength is revealed." The man looked at Buddha, his eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and respect. He had lived his life believing that strength meant winning, dominating, showing superiority. But now, in front of Buddha, he began to realize that true strength was not in crushing others, but in being able to respond to hatred with love, to contempt with compassion. "How can I practice this?" the man asked, his voice laden with a sincerity he had never known before. "How can I be kind to those who seek to hurt me?" Buddha smiled, a smile full of understanding, and replied, "Begin with the decision not to return evil with evil. When someone offers you poison, you can choose not to drink it. Instead, offer the antidote, compassion. Look at the one who hurts you not as an enemy, but as someone who also carries their own pains, their own fears. By responding with love, you not only protect yourself but also offer the other person a chance to see beyond their own shadows." These words resonated deeply in the man's heart. He realized that throughout his life, he had allowed himself to be consumed by the darkness of others, reacting with the same intensity. But there, in Buddha's presence, he understood that there was another way, a way that required courage but brought with it a lasting peace. Buddha then told the man a brief story. Once there was a cruel king who, upon visiting a sage, gravely insulted him, expecting a furious reaction. But the sage, instead of being offended, looked at the king with eyes full of compassion and said, "Oh, your majesty, how much pain you must carry to speak with such hatred. May I relieve your burden with my love." The king, touched by these words, burst into tears, and at that moment, the hatred he had carried for years began to dissipate. Upon hearing this, the man felt his own internal barriers begin to disintegrate. He realized that practicing love and compassion, even in the most difficult situations, was like lighting a candle in the darkness, and that light not only illuminated his own path, but also offered the other a chance to find their way out of their own labyrinth of pain and anger. The man, now with a heart flooded with new understanding, made a silent promise to himself. From that day forward, he would strive to respond to darkness with light, to fight hatred with love. And with that, he took another step on his journey of transformation, following the path that Buddha had so gently illuminated for him. The man, now deeply moved by Buddha's teachings, felt lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He had understood the power of compassion and humility, but there was still one last obstacle in his heart, something he needed to confront to complete his transformation. Buddha, with his deep perception, knew that the man was still searching for one last answer, the answer to a question he didn't even know he was asking. And then, as if reading the man's heart, Buddha approached once more and said, "There is something more you need to understand. When toxic people come to you, they are looking for something very specific. They want your anger, your sadness. They want to see you shaken. That's how they feed their own shadows. But you don't have to give them what they seek." The man remained silent, reflecting on these words. He had spent so much time reacting to provocations, feeding toxicity with his own anger and frustration, that he had never stopped to think that by doing so, he was exactly where those people wanted him to be. Buddha continued, "When someone tries to hurt you, they expect you to react with pain. They want to drag you into the same abyss in which they are trapped. But if you don't give them that, if you, instead, offer the opposite, peace, forgiveness, love, then you not only protect yourself, but you also weaken the power they believe they have over you." The man began to understand. He realized that throughout his life, he had allowed toxic people to control his emotions, his reactions, even his inner peace. But there, in front of Buddha, he finally understood that he had the power to break this cycle. Buddha, seeing understanding blossom in the man, said with a tone of lightness, "Imagine that you are in a dense and dark forest, and someone tries to push you further into it, hoping you will get lost. But instead of entering the darkness, you light a lantern and walk in the opposite direction. The light you carry not only illuminates your path, but also reveals the darkness for what it truly is, an illusion that only has power if you allow it. The man visualized this image in his mind and felt a new strength rise within him. He understood that his greatest weapon against toxic people was not revenge or anger, but the refusal to be dragged into the same pit of negativity in which they were trapped. Buddha concluded, "When you don't give them what they want, you disarm their toxicity. They expect your anger, they expect your hatred, but you offer them peace. They expect your sadness, but you offer them a smile. And in doing so, you not only protect yourself, but also plant the seed of transformation in their hearts." The man, now completely transformed, looked at Buddha with deep respect and gratitude. He understood that true power was not in controlling others, but in controlling oneself, and that by refusing to feed toxicity with more toxicity, he not only freed himself, but also offered others the opportunity to find the light within themselves. The man, now overflowing with new understandings, felt as if he had been reborn. He had found a path that not only led him to peace, but also revealed the strength in compassion and forgiveness. The anger and hatred that had once consumed him were now replaced by a deep sense of serenity and purpose. He realized that all the battles he had fought, all the anger he had harbored, had not brought him the satisfaction or victory he had sought. Instead, it had led him further away from the peace he so desperately desired. But now, with Buddha's teachings firmly rooted in his heart, he knew that the true victory was not in overpowering others, but in overcoming his own inner darkness. The man's transformation was evident to everyone who had witnessed the exchange. His once harsh and angry demeanor was now softened by the light of understanding and compassion. And in that moment, he made a silent vow to himself. He would no longer let anger dictate his actions. Instead, he would follow the path of compassion, the path that Buddha had shown him. As the man prepared to leave the monastery, he turned to Buddha and bowed deeply. "I came here with the intent to challenge you, to expose you as a fraud," he confessed. "But instead, you have exposed the darkness within me and shown me the light of truth. I am forever grateful." Buddha smiled gently and replied, "The truth is not something I can give you. It is something you have found within yourself. Carry this truth with you, and it will guide you through any darkness you may encounter." With those words, the man left the monastery, no longer the same person who had arrived. He walked with a new purpose, a new understanding of what it meant to live a life of peace and compassion. And from that day forward, he became one of Buddha's most devoted followers, spreading the teachings of love, forgiveness, and inner strength wherever he went. The lessons he learned that day became the foundation of his new life. He knew that he would still face challenges, that there would still be those who sought to drag him back into anger and hatred. But now, he had the wisdom to face them with a calm heart and a clear mind. He had learned that the greatest battles are not fought with fists or words, but with compassion and understanding. And so, the man who had once been consumed by his own darkness became a beacon of light for others. He dedicated his life to helping those who, like him, had been lost in the shadows of anger and pain, showing them that there was another way, a way illuminated by the teachings of Buddha. And in doing so, he not only transformed his own life, but also the lives of countless others, proving that the power of compassion and forgiveness can indeed change the world, one heart at a time. Thanks for watching. Here we come to the end of this story based on Buddha's teachings to help us to deal with toxic people. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. Share with your friends, and leave your comments below about what you thought of this Buddha story. We always bring inspiring stories with teachings for modern life.